All right. Well, welcome everybody. Whether this is meeting you in person or in the recording, I'm glad that you are with us in the Curve Circle today. And today is Wednesday, March 11th. So, let's dive in. We have an interesting topic to explore this week. And before we do that, let's become fully present. So, inviting you to come to the edge of your seat, pressing the feet in to the floor. Lengthening the lumbar curve, rolling the shoulders up, down, and back. Finding space between the vertebrae. And gently begin lengthening the breath. Inhale, allow the belly to rise. Exhale, allowing the belly to fall. Few more deep breaths like this. And as that feels complete in you, fluttering the eyelids open and coming back to this energy and space. All right, so as you know, we start off with a quote, and this week it is a quote from Eckhart Tolle. Give up defending yourself to yourself or to others. And the topic this week is releasing the need to prove. So many of us were taught directly or indirectly that love, the sense of belonging, and the sense of safety must be earned. If that resonates at all with you, feel free to drop your comment in the chat with a me. So we learned to prove our worth, to prove our intelligence, our strength, our healing, and even our spirituality. And so this afternoon, we are getting to explore where the need to prove comes from, how it blocks our sovereignty, and how the spiritual ego keeps it alive. And ultimately, we'll go through a couple of practices that allow us to release this energy of proving and fully return to presence. How many of you are deeply committed to growth and yet quietly exhausted from feeling like you have to prove yourself to belong? Does that resonate at all? So what's really the hidden cost of proving? In ACIM, the need to prove arises from the ego's belief in separation from God. When the mind believes it is separated from Source, three unconscious beliefs arise. 1, I'm lacking. 2, I am guilty for the separation between myself and God. And 3, I must defend my identity. Because the ego secretly believes it's unworthy of love, it attempts to compensate by proving value. So that lends us to the question, who I am, or the belief, who I am is not enough. And as a result, our nervous system stays in performance mode. Our worth becomes dependent on outcomes, and we seek validation instead of connecting with our inner knowing. And ultimately, disappointment becomes inevitable. Proving often feels like productive or being responsible or even virtuous. But underneath it lies an unconscious belief. Am I enough to deserve love? What this energy of proving does is that it separates us and disconnects us from our own embodied sovereignty. The body becomes subtly and constantly in a state of vigilance. And maybe our thought system, and if not consciously, maybe unconsciously, continues to scan. Did they approve? Did I say it right? Was that impressive enough? This line of questioning and remuneration is not a state of sovereignty, right? This is the ego trying to answer the question of, am I enough? Did I prove enough value through achievements, by being right, by being financially successful, by winning enough first places, by being admired, by being needed? How many caretakers are in the room? And by being special. Did I differentiate myself enough? Do I have enough awards? Right? However, in ACIM, A Course in Miracles teaches us you do not need to prove your worth to God. Divine, you fill in the word that works for you. It was given you in your creation. Something I really would love for you to hear with your heart is this next statement. Proving is essentially a misguided attempt to earn what is already inherent. None of us were ever broken. None of us were ever separated from Source. Our worth is inherent. Our value is inherent. We started to touch on this a little bit already, but let's define in finite terms what is proving. Proving is an attempt to demonstrate our value externally in order to feel worthy internally. In other words, this chronic vigilance state is a shadow. And it often sounds like, I need them to understand me. I need them to see my value. I need to show them I'm capable. I need to justify my decisions. And ultimately, it's often hiding a deeper desire to be loved, respected, or accepted. And here's the reality. When our worth depends on proof, our inner peace becomes conditional. So, where in your life do you notice yourself explaining more than necessary? Feel free to type in the chat box or in the comments of this post what comes up for you when I ask that question. Where in your life do you notice yourself explaining more than necessary? So, proving can show up in subtle ways, right? One is the over explaining of decisions. We make a decision, we share our decision with somebody, and someone goes, and then we think, oh my gosh, did I make the wrong decision? Or we try to explain why we made that decision. Or, and maybe in the process, justify our reasoning, right? Present our case, convince them to agree with us, to side with us, right? That is, in fact, the proving reflex, if you will. Some other examples of ways that proving can show up. Anybody in here guilty of working longer hours in the office to show our loyalty to our boss? Or taking on more projects at the office or around the house to justify our worth? And then what happens? The boss says, oh, yeah, sure. Here's another project. Here's another project. Here's another project. You're feeling like, oh boy, I'm being extra helpful. I'm valuable to my team. I'm proving my worth by working harder, longer. And then the weekly meeting comes where all of these projects are necessary to be completed, comes about, and the boss and nobody actually even mentions all of your hard work. There's no public thank you for taking on these extra projects, for helping the team meet the deadline. Zero recognition. So now how do you feel? Maybe your feelings are hurt. Maybe you start to feel a little resentment. This is super common when we've had very prominent and or successful financial careers, right? So you're not alone in this. And so sometimes we have a really good awareness of our patterns and habits. And we're like, yeah, I shifted that. I don't do that anymore. I have got good boundaries in place. I know my limits. I've shifted my job. I've shifted my schedule. I'm okay with saying no. Maybe we've got all that going on. Amazing. Like, first off, just celebrate yourself. That's amazing. And sometimes proving shows up in the spiritual circles. And ACIM talks about this in the context of specialness. So, specialness is the ego's attempt to solve separation by being better or worse than others. This element of comparison reinforces the illusion of separation. Proving feeds specialness because it attempts to demonstrate your capability, that you're more spiritual, more intelligent, more successful, more self-aware, more wounded. How many in this room have identified as being wounded healers, right? Or maybe you've taken on the identity of, I'm always the one misunderstood. Any of those resonate? And another way that it can also show up is in this example, or in some examples of appearing to be healed. I've got everything together. I did that work already. I'm done. The feeling pressure to always be calm. The always talking about the work that you're doing, the proving that you're doing the work. Or if you find yourself in a space of comparing your spiritual progress to somebody else, not to a previous version of yourself, but to somebody else's journey. These are all ways that the spiritual ego can show up. And basically, the ego has taken on a different costume, but the question underlying the costume is the same. Am I enough? And so when we're at this point, remember that proving is about identity. So now instead of this physical body being identified as the need to be defended, the spiritual ego is now defending the spiritual identity of this body. Okay? And it comes back to a lot of times to safety and worthiness. So oftentimes the ego will say, if I can just be special enough, I will be safe. And I want you to remember that us staying trapped in this idea of specialness keeps us attached to the ego and in comparison and in hierarchical thinking. And this blocks us from being able to receive what was already given, to receive the energy of love, to recognize that true miracles occur when we release this idea of separation, of specialness, and embrace the idea of remembering that we are part of Source and that we are all equally worthy of love. oftentimes in this energy of proving, there is what is known as a disappointment cycle, right? These conditional beliefs of if I show up fully, then they will recognize me. If I do everything right, then they will choose me. If I give it my best, then they will appreciate me. And in all of these conditional statements, we're holding hidden expectations. And these hidden expectations have unspoken contracts, which often go unmet. And so that cycle, the energy starts off in this proving energy. Then there's a hidden expectation, an unmet expectation, and therefore disappointment. And in ACIM, disappointment arises because the mind has tried to control perception through behavior. Love cannot be forced through proof. So disappointment is often a signal that the ego is trying to earn love. But the really important thing here is that love is not conditional, right? Divine love is unconditional. And this is what we are working towards remembering. So, how do we shift? Right? One of the things that we talk about in the Courage Circle a lot and in this community in general is embodying our practices. So, how do we embody sovereignty in this case? Just a reminder, sovereignty, and especially embodied sovereignty, means that we're living from inner authority and divine identity. So that we remembered that love is from Source and that we are part of Source, right? And so we release this belief that our worth must be demonstrated because we remember that our worth is inherent. When we're in the energy of proving, we're blocking our own sovereignty because it places authority outside of ourself. And something that can unconsciously happen here is that we create a dependency loop. When we're in the energy of proving, we can unconsciously be asking, do you approve of me? Wait, am I impressive enough? Did I do enough? Do you see my value? Do you perceive me to be worthy? And these dependency loops outsource our frequency, our power, because they're contingent upon external responses rather than inner knowing. So instead of, I know who I am, and leading the conversation from that anchor point, the energy in our tone and in our conversation in the proving mind is more along the lines of, well, I hope you see who I am. It's a bit more timid. It's a bit more shrunken shoulders, rounded shoulders. There's a lot more smallness involved, right? And that's because the nervous system stays in this sympathetic activation. Why? Because the other person's approval is unpredictable. We can't control what they're going to say. And therefore, our state of steadiness is outsourced to their response. You can see how this isn't a non-win-win for both parties, right? Okay. When we're improving energy, we stay in that chronic vigilance state. We stay in performance mode. There is a subtle anxiety in the body. And there's a constant monitoring of the room, of the other person's energy. In order for us to embody sovereignty, it requires two things: that we have self-trust, and as a result of that, we can internally regulate. And if we are internally regulated and we have our own self-trust, then inevitably we will break the dependency loop because we're relying on our own inner authority. When we relate this to the spiritual ego, when we're in the energy of proving the spiritual ego, we might have the underlying question of, do others see my gifts? Am I spiritually advanced enough? Am I doing my mission correctly? Am I fulfilling my soul contract like I should be? Did Spirit choose me? All of these questions block us from embodying our sovereignty because they take away our inner authority. When we're in embodied sovereignty, there is a knowingness that simply states, I am an expression of the divine, period. No wavering, no ifs, ands, or buts, period. And this embodied sovereignty, when it's true sovereignty, doesn't need constant affirmation. There is a calm self-trust present. It doesn't need over-explaining. There is an openness, in fact, to misunderstandings. And our presence is grounded, rooted. Our worth is no longer negotiated. We remember that we are at home in love. So let's go in. I want to give you a practice from Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, and it's called the presence pause. And so there are 5 parts to this. And when we have the impulse to prove ourselves, the first step in this practice is simply to pause. Then you're going to ask yourself, what am I trying to prove right now? And since you've created a pause, you can connect with the breath and bring awareness to the body. And step 3 then is to ask, what sensations am I experiencing? Maybe you notice an awareness that you have a tightness in your chest. Maybe there's tension in your jaw. Maybe there's an urgency in your breath. So after you notice those sensations and name them, the 4th step is to take 3 slow breaths. And internally say, oh, this is the ego seeking identity. When we bring presence to proving, the proving energy disappears. So I lovingly challenge you, each of us actually, to take note of how frequently this proving energy arises in us this next week. Were you able to catch it at the beginning? Or did you notice it after the fact? Where were you in your spectrum? If you noticed it, were you able to pause? And when you came present, what shifted? I would love to hear your experience if you decide to take me up on the challenge. All right, shake it off. We've got another practice. This one is a guided meditation. All right. So this is based on ACIM and it is a forgiveness meditation. Okay. So let's come to the edge of our seats, lowering your eyes down. Rolling the shoulders, moving in any way that allows you to settle in. And instead of shaming this proving impulse that we all experienced and all participated in, the invitation now is to bring a loving responsibility. Okay? A recognition that the proving was that part of you believed that love had to be earned. So, what were you hoping to receive? Recognition, appreciation, belonging, love, safety. We can take responsibility by acknowledging that the love I was trying to earn is already available to me. The love I was trying to earn is already available to me. What does that feel like in your body? If you haven't already done so, allow the eyes to close completely and place one hand on your heart. Take a slow breath in through the nose and gently release. Now bring to mind a moment where you felt the need to prove yourself. Perhaps you were trying to be understood, or maybe even impressive. Maybe you were trying to earn love or prove your worth. And as you connect with your memory, I invite you to do so without judgment. Just to notice the memory. And in this quiet space, I invite you to ask Source, Divine, Spirit, Universal Consciousness to show you the innocence beneath this moment. And allow yourself to see the part of you that believed, I must prove my worth. Notice this moment without judgment. And I invite you to say, I forgive myself for believing I had to earn love. Keeping your hand on your heart space if that feels aligned. Allowing yourself to repeat that phrase as many times as needed. I forgive myself for believing I had to earn love. Slow the breath down. Stay connected in the body. And now imagine your divine support team surrounding you in light. And inviting you to hear or sense the message that they have for you. Feel that blanket of love, of worthiness being wrapped around you. Allow the nervous system to remember this truth, that you are already worthy. And as this next statement aligns for you, I invite you to say, I release the need to prove. I choose to remember who I am. I release the need to prove. I choose to remember who I am. Please inhale. Please exhale. And as you're ready, flutter the eyelids open and return back to the room. So I ask you, from this place of groundedness, what would you change if you trusted that your value was already known? I'd love to hear your response in the comments. And remember, the yellow brick road isn't about getting somewhere. It's about remembering who you are, one honest step at a time. I hope you have a beautiful week. I look forward to connecting with you in the community. Ciao.